Welcome to Small Town Snarks. I'm Joel.
And I'm Miranda. Let's get snarky.
I float in a boat in a raging black ocean. Hey, in the water,
Nowhere to go.
The tiniest lifeboat full of people I know. Okay, we'll have to stop there because, right, and the words were probably very wrong. We're back.
We're back.
It's another episode.
Heather.
And someone.
What?
Oh my gosh. So,
corn nuts.
Corn nuts. Plain or BQ?
BQ.
Always BQ. You ready to have some big fun today?
I am.
Oh, great.
I'm always ready.
Great. Yeah. Last episode, we went through our process of auditions and rehearsals and talked about everything under the sun about Heathers.
We sure did.
And now we are at Tech Week.
Yes.
Tech Week.
Always a time.
You ready to just dive right into Tech Weweek?
I sure am.
Yeah.
I mean, this time we had 3 days instead of 2.
Right, we had more time. We did have more time.
Moving up in the world.
Yeah. I had honestly, I guess we'll just start right there. I had honestly forgotten how much about Tech Week and the fact that we only had 3 days.
Yeah, so on Tuesday we weren't in the venue, but we did a run through at the rehearsal space. So it's kind of like a laid back, we're just going to run the show again and then come back on Wednesday. But it was something with the venue logistics. I think they had movie night on Tuesday or something, so we couldn't be in there.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but the show, by the time we got to Tech, the show was so tight that it just, honestly, we didn't need more than 3 days, which is so nice.
Yeah, so I don't remember load-in specifically prior to Tech Week. I have glimpses and moments in my mind of walking into that space for the first time. I had never been backstage at the Arts Center before, and I was I was super excited. We had been spending all summer working on this project and getting ready to get this show off the ground.
Right.
And there was so much happening. And walking into the theater for the first time, I think I underestimated, or maybe I overestimated, I guess would be the better word. I overestimated the amount of space that was at our use for Heathers. It's a really tight space back there. We talked about it a bit with Grease, but fortunately our set was, mostly, it was stationary. It didn't go very far. We didn't have much that we were bringing on stage from the wings. So it really made good use of that space, which was super helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I think having everything on stage almost the entire time. I mean, like we said, it was a complete 180 from Grease, really, the strategy there. So having everything on stage and the fact that they got to practice with the set the whole time was... what a luxury. It was so nice. Things were running smooth. We had a couple small issues. I remember Wednesday of Tech when we did Heather Chandler's Nightmare, there was one person that wasn't covered when they were supposed to be covered.
Oh, yes.
So that was a little bit stressful. But overall, we really didn't have any major issues. Nothing that even compares to Grease.
Well, I did think the one thing I can remember very vividly from that Tech Week process. So there were actually 2 things. The first one being we were talking about Big Fun earlier and on our last episode. And I remember being up, it was probably maybe a night or 2 before opening. We were all up in the booth at the theater watching the run through of the show.
Yeah.
And I remember during that number, there were several tricks and a lot of flying people, a very active number. And I'll never forget all of us watching this number, and all of a sudden we saw someone's microphone hanging off of their face and dangling on the ground. Do you remember this?
Yes.
And I as a brand new, fresh back into community theater, back into theater in general, stage manager, okay, I don't know, that's a lot of money. It's a really big moment happening. There's a lot going on. Someone could get hurt. It's flying around. Yeah. And I just will never forget us trying to figure out how we were going to get everyone to just stop for a moment so that way we could adjust and get that problem fixed quickly.
Right. So we were all up in the booth. So we didn't have a God mic there because the soundboard is down behind the seats.
Right, yeah. Uh-huh.
And this was the first show we had ever purchased microphones for. So when I saw it dangling, I was like, oh, there's $500.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that was that was a tough moment to kind of like keep my composure. And it wasn't their fault, and we learned as we went, like, oh, they're doing tricks. We have to tape this microphone all the way down their back. But at the time, we hadn't thought of that, and it snapped.
That's
it was
right.
rough.
Yeah, it just, that's a clear memory that I have of the panic of us trying to figure out how best to resolve that problem in a moment's notice, and it's live theater. That's what you gotta do.
I think what we did is we ran.
Yeah, we did.
We ran downstairs and said, hold on.
Yes, yes. Yeah, that moment. And then the other thing, so one of my favorite things about theater is that, especially in the way that we're, constantly doing theater, and the way a lot of community theaters do it, where, you're rehearsing in a space and then you move into a theater and you have to troubleshoot problems and come up with creative solutions to things. One of the things that I remember was the noose moment. Yes. So there's a moment in the show where JD is trying to track down Veronica. It's late in the second act, and Veronica pretends to, essentially she pretends to hang herself.
Right.
And in addition to there being safety logistics into how we do that appropriately, we weren't really in a space that was conducive for us to display that in a way that looked authentic while also honoring and making sure that it was safe for our performers.
Right.
So we had a really delicate balance, and I have been going through our archives of just clips and things and seeing that moment. I remember being backstage trying to figure out how we could hang something that would give the effect of that, and just seeing it afterwards, it ended up being just a line coming in from stage left that was at a very vertical. I mean,
it was the best angle. We could do.
Yeah. That moment was. I remember us having not a debate, but a discussion about how we could do that and like the height that would be needed for it to be appropriate for the stage and all sorts of different logistics.
And that's definitely something that I think it was a learning opportunity for us. Is if we had to do a scene like that again, we would put more time and energy into figuring it out in advance.
Yes.
And like at the time, we kind of like put it off until we got to the venue because we didn't know how we were going to do it.
Yeah.
And looking back, I understand why, but when it's such a delicate like safety thing like that, we know now, okay, this takes a lot of prep and care. And I think, if we had explained it to the venue, I'm sure they would have let us come in like a day in advance or whatever just to figure out how we were going to do that. So that's something we've learned, as we went.
Absolutely.
But yeah, we definitely were just kind of like, how in the world are we going to do this? And I think it worked, and it did what it needed to do. But I definitely think we would do it differently if we did it now.
Absolutely. And, I think about shows that we've done more recent where we've tried to fly things. And, like, a lot of those experiences came from that initial, like, process of, like, where's the safest way to do this? How can we make this look better? Those types of things. So everything was a learning opportunity, especially at the beginning. So
yeah, and it's hard when it comes to like safety and performances and what the script requires and set pieces and all the things. There's so many variables, and just trying to figure out how to do it in a way that is effective and as safe as it can be is challenging sometimes. Yeah.
Do you have anything else as far as like memories from Tech Week go? I have so many comments about the show, but if you I want to make sure we address all of Tech Week before we get into the show itself.
Yeah. I think we had covered most of it. It was overall a pretty smooth tech process, at least from what I remember. It went well. We were really well prepped. The cast was really well prepped. So yeah, overall it was much, much smoother than Grease, which is probably why I don't have as many memories from it. But definitely have a lot of memories from the show. So take us away.
Oh my gosh.
Get us started.
Like I said, I have reviewed all of our archives and photos and clips and things that we have from the show. And it brought back so many memories this week. I even, I brought I have my script that I used, and I was like going through and looking at the blocking notes that I took, and like
I love that.
Watching it after being in this process now and working on as many shows as we do now, going back and seeing that.
Yep.
And seeing those clips, seeing those photos, the memories just flooded back in. And I was like, I just couldn't wait to have this discussion because there's so much to talk about.
You texted me so many times.
I did.
Updates. You were like, oh my gosh, I forgot we did this. I forgot we did this.
Yes.
It was just so exciting to kind of relive that with
100%. Yeah, it just was like a really like magical moment. But I just have to say, that cast, there was not
Stacked.
a weak spot in that cast.
Yeah.
Not a weak spot. Incredible cast. Some of my favorite moments that I picked out and that I remembered through this was so in Act 2, one of my favorite moments that we had in the show was so there's a song called Shine a Light.
Yes.
And in the song, Miss Fleming, right, is the teacher.
Fleming,
Yes. So she is trying to bring to light and raise awareness for all of these, a lot of people are dying at this school, and she's trying to bring awareness to that and shine a light on it. And this number is it's a completely ridiculous song in the show. And halfway through the number, she points out in the crowd her husband. Or I'm sorry, not her husband, but the man that she's having an affair with. Yes. So she points him out in the crowd, and we had this genius idea, and I'm sure it was your idea at the time.
No, it was yours.
Oh, was it mine?
You take full credit.
We had this idea of pointing out somebody in the crowd that we knew would either be on board with it or that we knew and just thought it'd be fun to highlight them as being Steve.
Yes.
So I don't know how we got to the point of like deciding, but I just remember us going through this process of picking out somebody in the audience to be Steve.
Yes.
And essentially in this moment, we had worked with your mom, who was playing Miss Fleming.
Yep.
We would point out to her or tell her during intermission who was Steve for that performance.
Yeah, we'd be like, third row to the right.
Yes. 6 seat in on the right. Yeah. That person is Steve, and the entire cast would direct their lights that they were holding in their hands, and she would point out to that person.
Yes.
And at the same time, we had the spotlight highlight that person in the crowd. And it was so genius and so ridiculous. And like obviously the person was caught off guard, but it just was so perfect. But the other thing that I'd forgotten about was that we had another member of our production team in the audience with a camera recording this, because it was a thing that was being broadcasted for the news, the moment in the show.
An 80s prop camera.
Yes,
like one of the big news cameras. Yeah.
Yeah, and like we even worked with them to make sure that they could also highlight Steve in the crowd, and it was just so smart and so ridiculous all at the same time.
Yeah, and the spotlight.
Yes.
So my husband was up in the booth running the spotlight, and we would tell him at intermission, hey, here's where Steve's going to be, and he would shine a spotlight on them as well.
Shine a light on them,
yes.
One would say, yes.
And you had reminded me of this, but there was one time where they misunderstood and they went to the wrong spot, and then they had to pivot, and like the light flew through the audience, and they were so frustrated, and it was amazing.
It was just a genius moment for that already ridiculous song.
Yeah, and the more I think about like the plot and the themes of it, I'm wondering if in 10 years the show will be canceled. I hope not, because I love the show. But...
Yeah. Yeah, it's really, from that standpoint, there's one thing I really like about the show, and it's the same thing you just said, essentially, is that it covers so many topics.
Yes.
And it's so topical, even though it's of its era. I mean, it definitely is it's very much so an 80s style musical.
Oh, yeah.
And, the fact that it's so topical now is, the fact that a lot of these themes are still prominent, it's a reflection back on society and on our culture.
Right.
And I think it's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah, and I love the 80s aesthetic. Like, I loved thrift shopping for these costumes. It was just so much fun. One of my favorite moments from the show is when the actor who plays what is the yellow Heather's name? Oh my gosh.
Heather McNamara.
Heather McNamara.
Yes. Uh-huh.
When she takes all the pills and they were Tic Tacs, and then Veronica goes to help her and sticks out her hand for her to spit them out, and this girl had probably 20 Tic Tacs in her mouth every time, and she would just keep spitting them out, and it was so funny. But again, that's just one example of subject matter, really tough, but making a joke out of it and like
making it lighthearted so it's digestible for our audience. Yeah,
exactly.
And it gets that point across in a really effective way.
Exactly. Yes. So that was just seeing all those Tic Tacs come out of her mouth every show. It's like, this is so ridiculous, and I love it.
Yeah. I thought about that moment as well, because the Tic Tacs, it was just like a genius, like beautifully staged moment.
Yes.
And it happens at such a tough time for Heather McNamara, and to like knowing that Veronica just comes in and saves the day in that moment. It's so powerful and so well done. I'm thinking of some other moments and some of the other things that just really stood out for me in the show, and what we did for Kindergarten Boyfriend.
Yes.
And I think about that performance a lot from the show, just simply because it was so beautifully done. I just think of like the railings that we had at the front of the platform, and having, I always think of our no swimming sign,
which is on the wall.
Yeah, it lives there in memory of Heather's.
Yeah.
But I just, that moment of that performer stepping over the railings and like the quick cut to black at the end of the song, just genius work.
I'll take credit for that idea.
Yeah.
I'm really proud of that one. We drilled holes into the front of the platform, but left enough room so she could step over the railing, and basically made a railing out of PVC pipe, attached the sign to it. It was one of our only set pieces backstage, and we would just carry it out, stick it into the platform, and then leave. I mean, that platform was our whole set, but the things we were able to do with it, like just revisiting the show makes me want to create a set like that again, because the things we were able to accomplish and tell in terms of the story with just the one piece is amazing.
Just so efficient and so effective.
Yes.
For telling the story.
Yeah, and it was really, like, you can tell by watching it, it was very well thought out. Like, we really thought out every single piece of that and how to utilize it.
Yeah, and I remember, thinking back to one of our earlier conversations about this show and about how another company was doing it in the area, I remember having a conversation with someone about how that moment was staged versus the other company.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling the compliments that we had received based off of our staging of it was very warming, like very, very heartwarming to me, that like it showed that we not only cared about that moment, but we wanted to make sure that it had the emotional impact that it deserved. And I always appreciated that compliment.
Yeah, I agree. And I think when you watch the show, or like the people in the audience who saw the show, I like to think they could tell that it was really a labor of love, and just like how much care we put into every moment, because we really did think through every moment of that show.
Absolutely.
And I mean, like I said in our previous episode about this other company doing it, it definitely lit kind of a fire under me, and I think it made me a better director, because I was feeling that pressure of, this show has to be as good.
Absolutely.
And not only that, I mean, we were in our second year as a company, and I knew there were going to be people that saw both shows, and I was like, we need to be able to hold our own here. Exactly. And that was a lot of pressure, but I think it comes down to this idea of, if you do what you believe is right creatively, and you do right by your actors, the results will come.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is the perfect example of that. Like, we didn't have a ton of resources, we didn't have a ton of money, but we cared so much about the show and our performers,
Mm-hmm.
and the results speak to that.
Right. And there's this big conversation. I know you and I have had this talk many times over the last several years, but there's a point in directing where you have to have faith in your actors and what they bring to the table. And I felt like in that show we had a lot of faith in our performers. They brought a lot to the table. They felt as passionate about the story as we did and wanted to make sure that they gave it their all. And it's not every show that you get to have that kind of relationship and working relationship with your performers. And I always felt really moved by that from this production in particular.
Yeah, and I think they were also feeling that pressure.
Yeah.
And it was like a great situation of, we're the underdogs again. We got to band together. We got to do the best that we can.
Yeah.
This was also the first show that we got reviewed.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big deal. I didn't tell anyone we were getting reviewed. And then once it happened, I remember the reviewer talked to our Veronica and our JD, and they just loved the show. And they even put a line in there like, the only thing, wrong with it is that the run was too short. Like something just very complimentary. And I was definitely feeling very anxious about getting a review. It was the first one I'd ever gotten. You don't get reviewed in high school usually, so I wasn't familiar with the process.
Yeah.
And the thing with getting reviewed is you have to be prepared to be torn apart, and if you're not, don't get a review because you might be torn apart, and that's part of it. But one of the big things was, I need to legitimize this company. I need to show people, like, we're doing good work over here, and we deserve to be able to take up space.
Absolutely.
And that was part of it. And, getting that feedback really felt big to me because I was like, oh, we're doing something here that is resonating with people that see a lot of theater.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's having that effect, and that it's one of my favorite conversations that you and I have had about reviews is that it's always that one person's perspective and how they feel about the show. And like someone could come in and say they hate the show and it's the worst, they could come in with those biases ahead of time. So like having that experience of letting someone see your work and being open and willing to have whatever criticism may come from it it's a big deal. It's a really big deal. And I think that this was such a good show to be your first opportunity to have that experience because you had such a strong cast. You had a set that you were really proud of. You had it was a package and a production that we could be really proud of.
Yeah, and I think it's almost time to revisit it. I'm just talking about the show. I'm like, all right, it's time. Let's do it again.
I would do the show again anytime. It's a blast of a show.
It's so much fun.
It is so fun.
And it's important. And I think, like you said, with the comedy in the difficult situations, it makes it more palatable for people to be able to start that conversation.
Exactly.
And I think that's what's so hard about, Heathers and Avenue Q is I look at these shows and I'm like, 5 to 10 years from now, are we still going to be able to do this material? Because it is so edgy and it's starting to get dated. But I think what both of those shows do so well is making it palatable. And even if it's not perfectly done, if it starts a conversation, I would argue that it's worth it.
That is all that matters. Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, there were a couple other things that I picked up on.
Yes.
Going through my research that I just can't wait to bring up. Talking about beautiful stagings, do you remember The Door? Talking about the scene with the noose, but The Door.
Yes, in Meant to Be Yours.
Yes.
That was one of my favorite moments.
Yeah. I remember you and I having that conversation before we staged that, and we knew we wanted to delineate space because essentially JD is supposed to be physically separated away from Veronica in that moment. And we had the presence of Kurt and Ram and Heather Chandler throughout Act 2. They're written in to be like kind of this internal monologue for Veronica. Right,
like her, like kind of ghosts, but her guilt.
Yes,
essentially,
exactly.
Manifesting as human versions.
Yeah. And, essentially what we ended up going with was they formed a door between JD and Veronica, and it was staged in a way where the three of them were present on the platform between the two of them, and then when they needed to create that delineation of space, they stood between them in a straight line.
Yeah.
And it's such a smart way to do that, especially because I remember halfway through that song when JD's anger and frustration started bearing down on Veronica even more. I remember them initially facing JD, but then turning to face Veronica. Mm-hmm. And just that intense pressure was building up even more. And it just was so... I just get like goosebumps thinking about it. And I'm like, it's like if I wasn't there helping create that moment, I'd be jealous of that moment. Because it just was so good. It was so intentional, and it was just so worth it.
Yeah, and I think that's something I look back on, you know, as a good reminder, because like I said, we didn't have a ton of resources. Our set was small, the venue was small, but it forced us to be creative, and we came up with some really cool moments, that being one of them.
Yeah.
We didn't have a door, we didn't have walls. Okay, we're going to make these ghosts the door. And I remember even when, like, JD is, like, going through this moment of, like, frustration, really intense emotions, he would slide down the people as if it was a door and, like, rest his head on them. And it was so gorgeous, like, just so satisfying
Beautiful
to watch.
moment.
We'll have to pull a clip from the archives to put on social media because it was very satisfying to watch that.
For sure. Yeah, it was just a really, really beautiful moment. Really beautiful.
Yeah, and him starting that song, popping out of the platform, was amazing as well.
Yes, yeah, that
people were not expecting that.
No. Nope. And he had to be in there for several minutes prior to that song, so he was dedicated to that moment for sure. Something that is a bit more controversial on my list of memories, and you and I have had this debate. It's a long-standing debate and conversation in our history of blocking shows and set pieces for shows. But I want to talk and settle all of the energy about one particular item that did not make it into the show that I know you were very passionate about. And Miranda, that would be the mailbox.
Yeah, so...
You want to explain the mailbox for us?
I wanted a mailbox outside of JD's house when Veronica comes up for Dead Girl Walking. And part of my rationale is, again, we were trying to delineate space, and I wanted to make it clear that she was outside of the house. And we had stacked 2 of the seats that come out of the platform, and we put a mailbox on top. And it became clear that it wasn't working. But I really wanted to do it. And we ended up, one of our friends who was kind of like a consultant on the show said, hey, you need to cut that. And I was like, okay, finally, I gave in and I cut it. Where I still get salty to this day is that particular person still makes jokes about how he saved the show
because of the mailbox.
Because he cut the mailbox, and I'm like, all right, you didn't save the show, okay? It was just one piece that I was wrong about.
I always thinking about that number in particular. First off, Veronica and JD Veronica just hit that song out of the park.
Oh, yeah.
Just as she does with every song she sings. But that moment and, like, the reveal of JD being up on the platform and, like, the timing, I completely understand that delineation of space and, like, having that mailbox there. Like, the mindset was there, but, like, that timing of the curtain opening and revealing him being there. And, like,
it worked really well.
It did end up working really well. And I definitely do not believe that the mailbox made that show, pushed it over the top. But I myself have also been very passionate about certain prop items.
Yeah, I think that's part of it is, you know, as a director, you get really attached to certain things that you've envisioned from day one. Yeah. And with every show, there are certain things that we have to let go because it's just not working. And sometimes it's harder than other times. And that was one of the ones that was hard for me. You know, just recently, you did a show where we had, you know, spinning backdrops, and we realized, the backdrops we took a while to paint, we're not going to use 2 of them because we don't have time to spin them, you know? And those are always difficult to process.
Yeah, and it's just coming to terms with that, but realizing at the end of the day that, you know, the show will go on, and
Right.
you can still find effective strategies to do what you're aiming to do.
Exactly. It's more important to have a tight, clean show.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. The other big thing, well, so there were kind of two other things about this show and this production, and then I kind of want to talk about like the audiences a little bit. But
Yeah.
the two big things that I wanted to still bring up was there was a certain performance where I'm just going to say, just a general note to people, theater etiquette note and theater practice note for performers. Always check your props.
Yep.
Always check your props.
Yep.
We had a moment, I want to say it was our opening night. I think it was, or it was like our, no, we only did 3 shows, correct?
We only did 3.
So it had to have been our opening night when this happened.
Okay.
Where a prop weapon was misplaced, and it was not where it was supposed to be. And I don't remember the logistics because that a similar, I believe we had more than one because it was used multiple times throughout the show. And I will never forget during that opening night, and this was a really big learning lesson for me and also for the individuals that supported that moment backstage, but that prop was not where it needed to be.
Yep.
Fortunately, the person who was using that prop and their co-star, I mean, it was a Veronica and JD moment.
Yep.
Were so prepared to continue the show efficiently without that prop. They knew without it, they were going to be okay.
Yeah, they changed their blocking.
They did.
To accommodate for it,
yes,
basically.
100%. But I remember there was an instinct from a technician for the show to slide out a very popular prop from the show, croquet mallets.
Yeah.
And I remember their instinct was to, okay, well, they don't have the other weapon that they need, so let me slide out a croquet mallet.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I'm like, okay, well, you do give them another option, but that is a prop that they've never used before in that scene.
That they also don't know is on the floor.
Right, that they don't know is on the floor, and it's also a very active scene.
Yep.
And there are so many ramifications to using a prop like that.
Yeah, I understand as, like, they weren't super experienced in theater, and I understand the thought process of this is what I need to do to make this work, and I appreciate the initiative there. But yeah, it's definitely one of those things where it's better to trust your actors that they're going to figure it out than it is to throw something at them that they've never done before.
Right, exactly. So, it definitely, I mean, for me as well, it was also a learning opportunity because I don't believe I remember from, like, previous to that, my theater experiences, something to that extent happening. Like, it was a prop that was integral to the storyline. So, like, I don't remember that ever happening to that extent before. So seeing not only actors continue to perform their scene without their prop and make it intentional and make it effective, but also letting it be that learning opportunity, like you said, of, this isn't the best way to handle this, but there are other avenues or other considerations to keep in mind when something like that happens. So
right, and it's something you don't necessarily think about explaining because you don't anticipate it happening.
No.
And we were fortunate enough where the 2 actors, JD and Veronica, they were very smart actors. And by smart actors, I mean they were able to think about the full story while they were acting, which not everyone can do.
It is a very special skill.
Yeah. And they were supposed to have 2 guns in that scene. They had 1. They knew that the other person needed to get the gun. So the person who had it fumbled and dropped it so the other person could get it.
Yes.
And that is a totally different set of skills that a lot of actors don't have.
Right.
And we were very lucky that they knew what they were doing.
We're in that position.
Like, I wouldn't have been surprised if it were other actors, if they pretended to have a finger gun instead of a real gun. Because, like, people just, sometimes they just don't know what to do. And those particular actors
act out of instinct.
know how to do that.
Sure. Yeah. Talking about this topic in particular, one thing that we also used a lot of in the show, from my memory, was blood and blood packs. And meant to be, or Our Love Is God, Meant to Be Yours, that moment at the end of Act 1.
Oh, where Kurt and Ram are shot.
Yes.
Yep.
That
Spoilers.
was,
sorry.
yes. Oh, spoilers. We did already talk about them being ghosts, so we might be okay there. But there's that beautiful stage moment that I remember at the end of the first act where it's just JD and Veronica on stage together after that horrific moment happened. And I'll never forget the staging of how we got, I want to say it was Kurt off stage. I think he was the last one to be a victim of JD in that moment. And we essentially got him off stage, and JD went off stage, leaving Veronica on stage with Ram.
Yeah.
And JD came back on with blood just streaming down his face.
Yeah, because he shot him off stage,
right.
so we had technicians spray blood on his face.
Mm-hmm. And that final look at the two of them hitting that final note right before the end of Act 1 is like, that's a moment you talk about during intermission.
Oh yeah, like he's covered in blood. He has his arms wrapped around her, and the way she was communicating what Veronica was feeling to the audience, like her facial expressions in that moment, was so good. And it was a very clear moment of, oh, this is an abusive relationship.
Yes.
And I feel that they did such a great job of that. I think we were able to stage it in such an effective way where I've seen productions of it where that scene isn't scary. And it's supposed to be scary because it escalates so much. Like they're actively killing people now. Like Heather Chandler, we can call that an accident. This was not an accident anymore. So it just, that moment is so good. It's so juicy.
The other memory that I had, and then I have some fumbles that I remember from the show, but this memory that I have took place after one of the performances. So actually during curtain call.
Oh, yes.
Yes. A certain cast member, so we're going to talk about the audience a little bit here in a few moments, but people were very engaged with the story coming to Heathers. They knew the story. People were coming dressed up as the Heathers or Veronica. They were really into it. And I'll never forget, at one of the performances, there were people in the front row dressed as the Heathers. And one of our cast members decided that at the end of curtain call, there's a little bit of a musical, party kind of moment right before the very end of the performance. And one of our cast members decided that they were going to bring the people who were dressed up as the Heathers up on stage.
Yep.
That, I can honestly say, was an experience that I never anticipated.
Nope.
Never thought I'd have to address. But it still sits in my memory as one of those moments of like, okay, from a business perspective, was such a liability for the company to bring people up on stage.
Yep.
Dangerous because there were a lot of moving pieces. That stage is very high. There's a lot of people. And there were just a lot of ifs, like a lot of circumstances that could have happened in that moment.
Yep.
And that person made a choice that was very, in the moment, I'm sure they felt very impassioned about it and wanting to let that happen. But it was just something that we had to address immediately. And you and I ran.
We were in the back of the house,
yes,
and we kind of let it play out, and then we were going to talk to him. And I remember my husband running down from the booth, and he was like, "Are you going to kill him or not?" And I just shot him a look of like, back off. Because I knew he was so angry, and every right to be. Like, it was very stressful, and we weren't anticipating it. But I was like, you're gonna escalate this. You need to let me handle it. But you still talk about that look I gave him of like, I just immediately shut it down with one look. And then we had a conversation with that cast member. I was like, hey, you can't do that.
We had it like in the wing. Like you and I were on stage before the cast had completely exited the stage to have that conversation with him. Because
it's just, I mean, that's definitely something you have to run by your leadership before 100%. You try to do that. And he really just pulled this person up on stage. And I was like, no. Nope. You went rogue, and I do not appreciate that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I mean that moment was a big one. Another good learning lesson for us of like, hey, don't do anything you haven't done before.
And now we give that speech every single time. Yep, exactly.
Did you have any other memories from the show before I get into some of the fumbles and things that I thought of?
Yeah, I have a couple.
Yeah.
One of my favorite moments was when we did Dead Gay Son, and after the two dads kissed, there were just rainbows shooting across the cyc. And if you remember from Greece, there were unintentional rainbows in Summer Nights. These were intentional rainbows.
Yes.
Fun rainbows. I just love Fight for Me. Everything
Beautiful
about that
moment.
choreography,
Yeah.
I just love it. Every time we would do Candy Store would start, the audience would go crazy. That was so much fun. I also remember at the finale, I've seen a lot of productions that kept Heather Duke in the finale, and we made the choice to not have her in the finale because we had decided like her character wasn't in a position to, or well, I think she was in the finale, but she wasn't up with Veronica and Martha and Heather McNamara. And
Feeling very conflicted about what was going on.
A lot of productions I've seen, Heather Duke just comes up and holds hands with them. And I feel strongly about the way we did it. I think with that particular context of the story, it's like we really felt like she was not there at that moment. So we let Veronica, Martha, and Heather McNamara have that. And it was such a powerful moment, the three of them standing there, and Martha's in her little wheelchair with her neck brace, and it was just such a good moment. For
sure. Yeah, beautiful moment. Yeah.
And those are the main things I have. I'd love to hear about the craziness.
So two fumbles that I remember from this show in particular. Do you remember when the plate broke?
No.
Yeah, so there was a moment where Heather Chandler drops a croquet ball on the pate.
Oh, yes.
Yes, and the croquet ball dropped, and the bowl just shattered into like 4 pieces.
Oh my gosh,
and I think that might have been our first experience of like potential glass being a problem. Fortunately, I think it all kind of stayed contained, but yeah, that croquet ball just shattered the glass.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so there was that one, and then my other favorite fumble was we had 2 staircases.
We sure did. Movable staircases.
And if they didn't line up appropriately, sometimes if they were right next to each other, one of them would lean ever so slightly. And I'm pretty sure one of the nights JD almost tripped going up the stairs because the stairs kind of shook.
Yeah, so he was walking up, and the stairs were moving as he was walking up, and he barely made it. He made it though, but I have a video of that. Leave it to Eric to get some slow-mo clips. I think we have a slow-mo clip of that I'll share. But it was like an action movie. I mean, he's running, it's moving underneath him, and he made it up somehow. But talk about stressful to watch.
Yeah, for sure. It was just one of those moments of, sets are what sets are, and sometimes
they go rogue.
And you got to go rogue with them. So. I do want to talk about the business aspect of Heather's.
Yes.
For me, what was so exciting about doing that show, I mean, I was very excited to do it in general, but being in a real theater, putting on a show, and then seeing the response that we got.
Yes.
Those performances were packed.
Yep. It was the first time we'd ever sold out a performance.
Yeah, I mean, they were pulling chairs from everywhere.
Yep.
They were pulling chairs from everywhere. It was, the response that we got from that show was incredible.
Yep.
And I, like, seeing people overjoyed about the story, seeing people come in costume, seeing people just excited to be there was so great.
Yeah.
And I just will never, I don't think we'll ever have quite the experience that we did with that show. It just...
Yeah, probably not.
The following and the interest in that story just broke through, and it just, people were hungry for that story and for that experience.
It was really the perfect time to do it. It just, everyone was into the show at that time.
Yes.
So that was great. And I remember it was very rewarding because I was so worried about this other company doing it and that it would affect our ticket sales. But we ended up being packed, which is amazing. And, having that moment of just people being so invested in the story. And it's so rare to have people like show up in costume for a show. It was almost like Rocky Horror level but different sure. because not everyone does Heathers, but you know, the fan base was there.
Huge,
people were actually traveling to go see it because it was the only production near them that they could see.
Exactly.
So that was definitely a rewarding moment, and I think it was a great show for us to start collaborating on, just because we definitely got that dopamine hit of like, oh, we did something really cool here.
Yeah, I look forward to discussing, though, a little bit more in upcoming episodes about how that ego sat with us for a little, and by us, I mean me, for a little bit, but
and me too. I'll take accountability.
We were very excited about that response from that show, and I think that led to making certain choices as we moved forward. So I'll be interested to dive into that.
Some poor business choices, but it's also, you know, we were on cloud nine.
We were very optimistic.
Yeah,
and the only thing that I can say after that experience is that I wish that run could have been longer.
Me too. But it will be the next time we do it.
Yes, the next time, yes. 6 months of performances.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Maybe not.
Yeah, but yeah, it just was such a great time.
It's also one of the few shows that we've done that I don't get tired of the music.
I agree with you on that. I could listen to that soundtrack.
Yeah.
All the time.
There are other shows where I'm like, it doesn't matter how good it is. I'm like, okay, I've listened to this for 3 months and I'm done. But Heathers, I can revisit it anytime.
I do remember, and actually I'll use the expression that we like to use after a rehearsal and a show process has been very tedious. I like to use the term putting a show on a shelf.
Yeah, put it in a box.
Put it in a box and put it up on the shelf, and let it just rest there for 10, 20, 30 years, depending on how the experience went. And I think for me with Heathers, it was a very similar experience where, like, I remember us loading out of the space. I don't remember the process itself, but I remember driving the set back to, I think it was your parents' house at the time. And I remember, I feel like I was driving the U-Haul. That might have been my first time driving the U-Haul, or I was driving behind it might have been driving behind the U-Haul.
I think you were behind the U-Haul. I don't think you had driven one at that point.
Yeah, but I remember just, like, following in a line back to your parents' house, and I was listening to Heathers on the way back. I just could not get enough of that music, and that just, like you said, it was a dopamine hit of just, like, pure just, like, gratefulness for that experience and like, joyful for everything we got from that show.
And that was kind of tough at the time because we were only doing one show a year, so the post-show blues were very real because it was like, all right, see you next year.
And I don't think I don't believe by that point we had any discussions about what our next show was going to be, so it really did feel like it was just going to be we're done and we'll pick it up when we pick it up again.
Yeah.
So I know that was a very, very hard feeling at that point.
Oh, yeah.
But we definitely, I mean, I could speak for myself, but I'm sure you feel the same way that, like, after that show, we were ready to get going on another one.
Oh, yeah. It was like, let's go,
there was no question of whether or not there was going to be another one. It was just, okay, great. What is the next one?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for that process, and I feel like if it would not have been if I didn't feel as passionate about that experience, I don't know. Like, I always knew that I wanted to keep doing it, but, like, that experience just made me super joyful and excited for whatever was coming next. So.
Agreed. And it was such a positive experience getting to work together and having that result. And also, I wasn't super passionate about Grease as a show. This was the first show I did that I was super passionate about. So having that response, it was so special, and definitely was nice getting to talk about it, because I feel like I haven't thought about it even in a while, and thinking about it and remembering that experience just makes me want to do the show again. I'm like, let's go. We need to revisit this one.
It's a really good, what I like about this platform and us doing this podcast is it's making me more grateful for those experiences.
Yeah.
And it makes me think back about how far we have come in this process. And, like, I don't think if you would have asked me, was that 8 years ago now, or actually probably like 8 years ago, I wouldn't have thought that we would be in the position that we're in right now. So, like, it's a big growth experience. It's a big emotional experience, and I'm just, like I said, super grateful for her. So
me too.
Yeah.
Well, this was a pleasure.
This was a pleasure. And you want to talk about what's on the horizon?
On the horizon is Spring Awakening, my friend.
It sure is.
We're going to sing the song of Purple Summer.
All day, every day.
Next
couple of episodes. So stick around if you want to hear about our Spring Awakening experience, because gosh, do we have...
That one is interesting. And we also have some exciting interviews coming up.
Yes.
Make sure, submit your fan questions on our social media. We'd love to hear from you. And we want to answer anything and everything you've ever thought of.
Absolutely.
Send it in.
Yeah, theater or other's. We'll answer any questions.
What is that column called where people would send in their life questions?
Yeah, I mean, I just anything you want to know.
Anything you want to know. We'll give you our opinions on it. I don't know if they'll be helpful, but we'll give them to you.
Yeah, but it was a pleasure as always, and we'll be back next time.
All right. See you next time.
Alrighty.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for getting snarky with us. We'll see you later.
See you next time.